The transfer alert hit her phone before she could finish apologizing to the wrong person. $5,000 received. For 3 stunned seconds, Mara Jensen forgot she was standing under a buzzing fluorescent light in the midnight baby aisle with her son crying in the cart. She forgot the empty can of formula at home, the landlord's pink notice on the door, the math that had stopped working 2 paychecks ago. All she could see was the number. Too clean, too round, too impossible, sitting beneath the message she'd blurted out with shaky thumbs. Ben, I'm sorry to ask again, but I need $50 for formula. Please don't tell Mom. $5,000. No, who is this? No wrong number. Just a deposit and a second message. So brief, it felt like an order. Buy what you need. Don't pay me back. The baby, her Noah, hiccuped a small, wounded sound. Mira pressed a hand to the little bird thrum of his chest. Her other hand clutched the phone as if it might fly away. She typed, "Who is this?" Then deleted it and tried again. "I think you have the wrong person," then erased that too because she was afraid the money might evaporate if she said the wrong thing out loud. Finally, "I can't accept this." A beat passed. The ceiling hummed. Another mother pushed a cart past with sleepy eyes and a toddler who needed nothing from anyone in the whole wide world because, of course, someone had stocked their pantry, remembered their list, held their fragile life together that day. Her phone buzzed. Accept it anyway. "Okay," she whispered, half to Noah and half to the aisle of tins and diapers and emergency hope. "Okay." She grabbed the cheapest store-brand formula, and because her hands were shaking, the more expensive kind the nurse had recommended when Noah was born, and his belly protested everything. She added diapers, wipes, the little rash cream the internet swore by. It felt like stealing. It felt like oxygen. At the register, the cashier gave her a bored look that slid into something like surprise when the card approved. Mara nodded to no one, tucked receipts into the diaper bag, like proof she had done something unremarkable and legal, and hurried back into the hard night. Outside, the city was a noisy aquarium, buses breathing, cabs flicking their tails, puddles winking under sodium lamps. She loaded Noah into the second-hand car seat she promised herself she'd upgrade when the world made sense again, then sat in the driver's seat and let her forehead rest on the steering wheel until the glass fogged with her breath. Who sends $5,000 to a stranger at midnight? She opened the message thread again, scrolling up. Her plea looked pathetic next to the cold generosity of those 2 short replies. A bubble of wild, exhausted laughter rose in her chest and burst. "We should frame this," she told Noah, "right over the sink. Exhibit A. When the universe does something weird and you say thank you before it changes its mind." Noah grumbled softly. She snapped his car seat buckle and promised the universe she would return the money, that she would keep a ledger in the notebook in her kitchen drawer and write down every cent and someday, somehow, find the person and make it right. Because that was the only way to survive with your head still attached. You kept receipts. You paid back the kindnesses. You remembered who you were when the world didn't. At home, the radiator ticked like a metronome trained for despair. Mira measured powder into warm water with hands finally steady, watching for the swirl to turn creamy and true. Noah latched so immediately and greedily that tears surprised her. "You're okay," she murmured against his hair. "You're okay. We're okay." On the counter, the phone glowed. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist and typed, "Thank you. Truly. I don't know who you are, but I'll pay you back as soon as I can. Please tell me where to send it." For a long minute, nothing. She resettled Noah, hummed an off-key lullaby, watched the pulse at his temple slow. Then, "You texted the right person?" She frowned. "I meant to text my brother. I know." The words dropped into her stomach like stones. "How do you know?" No response, just the rectangle of light, patient and blank. Her rational brain pointed out 10 ways this could be dangerous. Her other brain, the one that counted ounces and minutes between feeds and the exact number of steps between her bed and the crib, said hunger was more dangerous than mystery. She plugged in the baby monitor, washed the bottle, scrubbed the inside of the pot she had burned 2 days ago because she'd fallen asleep sitting up, and wrote return money at the top of a fresh page in the notebook. The letters too neat for the hour. Her phone buzzed again. You should eat something that isn't stress. A second buzz. An email receipt from a grocery service. Milk, bread, eggs, fruit. Delivery, 8 a.m. The address was her address. Her lungs forgot how to behave for a second. She typed, "Please don't send anything else. I'm grateful, but this feels..." She deleted scary and substituted too much. Then consider it a loan you don't owe. People don't work like that, she said aloud to the radiator, the sink, the stubborn patch of crayon on the wall from when Noah's cousin had visited. But someone did, apparently. She fell asleep on the couch with Noah breathing puffs against her collarbone and woke to a knock that snapped her heart into her mouth. Delivery, paper bags with clean angles and cold milk. She tipped the driver too much because the universe had to balance somewhere and scribbled groceries $48.19 under return money in the notebook. At 10, her phone buzzed again. "I'm sorry if I scared you. That wasn't my intention." She stared at the message. Then carefully, "Who are you?" A small, almost playful pause. She could imagine a mouth quirking at the edge of a screen. "Someone who's seen a baby go hungry. I didn't like it then, and I don't like it now." She sat down at the table. The wood was scarred with old nail polish remover and a circle from a mug that had leaked last winter, but it held. "Okay," she typed. "Thank you. I can manage from here." "Maybe, but you shouldn't have to manage alone." The words landed with awkward gentleness. She set the phone down, stood up, walked to the sink, and splashed cold water on her face. Pride was a brittle thing. You couldn't use it to build with, not really. It made poor scaffolding. It cracked in the cold. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard again. "Why help me?" "You don't know me. I read your message. I know enough." She didn't answer. He didn't either. The day folded itself into feeding and burping and bills, and a 22-minute nap that tasted like a miracle. When the quiet came around midnight, one of those thin, expensive silences, bought with rocking, and the last verse of the same lullaby sung 3 times. She Googled the name attached to the bank transfer, because whatever you could not name outright, you researched like your life depended on it. Albright Holdings. It was a rabbit hole leading to a larger rabbit hole that opened into a linked galaxy of articles and photos and breathless profiles. Jackson Albright, founder of Helix Core Industries. The headlines did a ridiculous 2-step dance. Visionary, recluse, genius, arrogant, savior, dangerous, all the adjectives money buys and rinses and hangs to dry next to power. Mara scrolled through images of a tall man with storm gray eyes and a mouth like a held line, on stage under clean lights, in front of a lab bench, at a ribbon cutting with a mayor whose smile looked like rental furniture. In one magazine spread, he stood beside a woman with a laugh, like the photographer had told her a joke, and Mara's stomach did a small, involuntary twist when the caption revealed late wife. She clicked away fast as if grief could be contagious through pixels. She locked the phone, put it face down on the table, and said to the dark apartment, "You have to be kidding me." The dark apartment offered no reassurance, no instructions, no map. At 2 a.m., after the 3rd feeding and the 2nd bottle of dish soap diluted to make it last longer, her phone lit up again, a small square ship in an ocean of not enough. "If it helps, you can think of it as a test." She whispered, "Of what? Of whether the right mistake can change 2 lives at once?" She laughed, all breath, no sound, and typed back before she could talk herself out of it. "And what if the right mistake texts the wrong billionaire?" The reply came without the pretend pause. He had been waiting. "Then the wrong billionaire can buy formula and ask a favor in return." Her skin went cold and hot at once. There it was, the catch, the hook in the worm. The reason men like him didn't need fishing poles. What favor? A longer pause now, or the illusion of one. She could see him somewhere high, glass and city, and a view that made maps of neighborhoods she'd only ever known from the ground. Come to Helix, not as charity, as work. You left something undone in your life. Come finish it. She stared at those 4 sentences until the screen dimmed and her reflection floated up. A tired woman with messy hair and determination like a spine. A baby asleep in the other room. a ledger open on the table. She typed, then erased, then typed again. I can't take a handout. It isn't one. It's an interview. She should have said no, on principle. She should have laughed at the idea of walking into a building that appeared on news feeds and skyline shots, a glass cliff with a logo. She should have put the phone in a drawer and closed it and slept like someone not standing at the edge of a different life. Instead, what time? Tomorrow, noon, 47th floor. Ask for me by name. She swallowed. Which is? For the first time, he wrote it out himself. No holding company, no bank. Jackson Albright. She closed her eyes. Of course, she said to no one. In the bedroom, Noah sighed and rolled an inch deeper into sleep. Mira covered him with the fox-patterned blanket her sister had sent when he was born and sat on the floor beside the crib until her knees complained. We're not those people, she told the dark. We don't go to floors with numbers that high. But the number on her phone, the one that had arrived like a dare or a rescue, said they could at least ride an elevator and see how it felt. At 4, she finally slept. At 9, she dressed in the blouse she saved for job interviews and court dates. She wrote Teresa a note asking if she could watch Noah for a few hours, slipped a 20 under the rubber band that held the mail together, and kissed her son twice, one for luck and one for courage. At 11:52, she stood in a lobby so bright her reflection looked briefly like someone else's, a woman who might belong somewhere with polished floors. The guard glanced at her diaper bag, then at her face, then at the sticky note where she had written 47th floor, as if the ink could make it real. Name? He asked. She wet her lips. Mira Jensen, I have a meeting with Jackson Albright. The guard's eyebrows hit a courteous question mark. He pressed a button. The elevator doors opened like an invitation and a test. As the car rose, 27, 34, 41, Mira's phone buzzed. Don't be nervous. You already told me who you are, she typed with steady fingers. And who's that? The doors slid open on 47. The corridor stretched like a held breath. At the far end, glass and sky, and a man turning toward the sound of the elevator. Her phone buzzed once more. Someone who asks for $50 when she needs a miracle. That's who I trust. She put the phone away and walked forward, not a miracle in sight. Just a mistake holding a door open, and a woman brave enough to walk through. The first thing Mira noticed wasn't the view, it was the silence. The kind that made you aware of your own breathing, of the soft scuff of your shoes on floors, too clean to have a smell. The kind of silence that said, decisions are made here, and most of them cost something. A woman with auburn hair and a knot precise enough to be architectural appeared as the elevator doors slid open. Miss Jensen? Her voice was warm without being soft. I'm Ava Lynn. This way, please. Ava didn't ask for a badge or an explanation. She didn't look at Mira's thrift store blouse or the diaper bag strap digging into her shoulder. She walked, and Mira followed through a corridor of frosted glass, where the shadows of other rooms moved like fish behind aquarium walls. At the end, the building opened into sky. He was standing with his back to them, hands in his pockets, the city thinking hard beneath the window. When he turned, the headlines caught up with the man. Storm gray eyes, a face arranged into stillness by habit. An absence of ring, a presence of attention. Ms. Jensen, he said, thank you for coming. She felt both seen and measured. I don't know what I'm doing here. That makes 2 of us, he said, just wry enough to undo a knot of her fear. He glanced at the baby carrier strap and nodded toward the chair opposite his desk. Please. Ava set a glass of water by Mira's hand, then faded back to the door. I'll be outside, she said, and was gone. Up close, he didn't look like a photograph. He looked tired in the expensive way, fatigue taken care of, but not solved. His sleeves were rolled, his cufflinks probably somewhere judging him. You texted me for $50, he said, not unkindly. I texted my brother by mistake, she corrected. He inclined his head, granting the edit. And I sent $5,000. That part I still don't understand. Jackson considered her, then the skyline, then her again. Most cons ask for more. She blinked. So you assumed I was a liar and rewarded me? I assumed you were telling the truth, he said, and that you meant every word of it. 2 different things. Mira gripped the water glass to keep her hands from fidgeting. You know who I am, she said, an accusation made quiet by awe. You knew my address. You knew. I asked my people to ensure you weren't being exploited, he said. I don't make a habit of guessing with strangers' lives. He paused. I apologize if it felt like a trespass. It had. It also felt like the first time in months someone had taken responsibility for how their choices landed on her. You have a son, he said. Noah, she said, and felt something in her voice soften at the name, like the way fabric changes where it's been worn most. And you studied biochemistry, he added. Her mouth quirked. You Googled me. I read your academic abstracts. His tone contained no apology. You were good at it. I was almost good at it, she said. Then life got expensive. He nodded once, as if he too knew the cost of things that didn't have price tags. May I ask why you left? He said. She could have lied. She didn't see the point. I had a baby. My husband didn't have the courage to be a father. I needed a job with hours that didn't care if a molecule wanted to behave at 2 a.m. I told myself I'd go back when we were steady. She let out a small breath. We never got steady. He absorbed this without flinching, as though her honesty was something he was accustomed to handling carefully. You survived, he said. Surviving isn't a resume line, she said, then regretted how defensive it sounded. It should be, he answered. It's a skill most people who run companies don't have. They let the silence stand between them for a moment. Outside, a helicopter cut a line across the river and turned into nothing. The world went on. You don't owe me anything, he said finally. I didn't ask you here for gratitude. Why did you ask me here, she said. If not to collect a favor, what's left? Jackson's gaze shifted, one small degree, from strictly professional to almost human. To tell you that I know what hunger does to a room, and that I'm sorry any part of my world contributed to it. She frowned. Your world? Helix, he said simply. The illusion we sell. Efficiency that squeezes wages, innovation that underprices labor, philanthropy that photographs well. The city believes men like me are solving problems. Sometimes we create them. It wasn't what she expected him to say. She braced for the PR pivot that never came. I lost someone, he added as if reading the question she hadn't asked. A child, years ago. I'm sorry, she said, because there is a narrow seam in language where nothing else fits without tearing. So am I, he said. It makes me impatient with certain kinds of suffering. Babies should never be hungry. It's inefficient, he added, and the tiniest suggestion of a smile crossed his mouth, as if he couldn't help the gallows humor of a man who lived in ratios and returns. She set the glass down before she dropped it. You sent a stranger money because you're impatient with suffering. I sent you money because you asked for an amount that could disappear into a stranger's pocket without ruining them, he said. And because you included the sentence, don't tell mom, that's the sentence of someone who still has pride. It was such a precise read of her that she wanted to look away. She didn't. You said in your text, he continued, that you would pay me back. I'm going to give you a way to do that. That doesn't involve writing me a check you network connection lost, attempting to reconnect. The first thing Mara noticed wasn't the view. It was the silence, the kind that made you aware of your own breathing, of the soft scuff of your shoes on floors too clean to have a smell. The kind of silence that said, decisions are made here, and most of them cost something. A woman with auburn hair and a knot precise enough to be architectural appeared as the elevator doors slid open. Ms. Jensen? Her voice was warm without being soft. I'm Ava Lynn. This way, please. Ava didn't ask for a badge or an explanation. She didn't look at Mara's thrift store blouse or the diaper bag strap digging into her shoulder. She walked, and Mara followed through a corridor of frosted glass where the shadows of other rooms moved like fish behind aquarium walls. At the end, the building opened into sky. He was standing with his back to them, hands in his pockets, the city thinking hard beneath the window. When he turned, the headlines caught up with the man. Storm gray eyes, a face arranged into stillness by habit, an absence of ring, a presence of attention. Miss Jensen, he said, thank you for coming. She felt both seen and measured. I don't know what I'm doing here. That makes two of us, he said, just wry enough to undo a nod of her fear. He glanced at the baby carrier strap and nodded toward the chair opposite his desk. Please. Ava set a glass of water by Mira's hand, then faded back to the door. "I'll be outside," she said, and was gone. Up close, he didn't look like a photograph. He looked tired in the expensive way, fatigue taken care of but not solved. His sleeves were rolled, his cufflinks probably somewhere judging him. "You texted me for $50, he said, not unkindly. "I texted my brother by mistake," she corrected. He inclined his head, granting the edit. "And I sent 5,000. That part I still don't understand." Jackson considered her, then the skyline, then her again. "Most cons ask for more." She blinked. "So you assumed I was a liar and rewarded me?" "I assumed you were telling the truth," he said, "and that you meant every word of it. Two different things." Mira gripped the water glass to keep her hands from fidgeting. "You know who I am," she said, an accusation made quiet by awe. "You knew my address. You knew." "I asked my people to ensure you weren't being exploited," he said. "I don't make a habit of guessing with strangers' lives." He paused. "I apologize if it felt like a trespass." It had. It also felt like the first time in months someone had taken responsibility for how their choices landed on her. "You have a son," he said. "Noah," she said, and felt something in her voice soften at the name, like the way fabric changes where it's been worn most. "And you studied biochemistry," he added. Her mouth quirked. "You Googled me. I read your academic abstracts." His tone contained no apology. "You were good at it." "I was almost good at it," she said. "Then life got expensive." He nodded once, as if he, too, knew the cost of things that didn't have price tags. "May I ask why you left?" he said. She could have lied. She didn't see the point. "I had a baby. My husband didn't have the courage to be a father. I needed a job with hours that didn't care if a molecule wanted to behave at 2 in the morning. I told myself I'd go back when we were steady." She let out a small breath. "We never got steady." He absorbed this without flinching, as though her honesty was something he was accustomed to handling carefully. "You survived," he said. "Surviving isn't a resume line," she said, then regretted how defensive it sounded. "It should be," he answered. "It's a skill most people who run companies don't have." They let the silence stand between them for a moment. Outside, a helicopter cut a line across the river and turned into nothing. The world went on. "You don't owe me anything," he said finally. "I didn't ask you here for gratitude." "Why did you ask me here?" she said. "If not to collect a favor, what's left?" Jackson's gaze shifted, one small degree, from strictly professional to almost human. "To tell you that I know what hunger does to a room, and that I'm sorry any part of my world contributed to it." She frowned. "Your world?" "Helix," he said simply. "The illusion we sell. Efficiency that squeezes wages, innovation that underprices labor, philanthropy that photographs well. The city believes men like me are solving problems. Sometimes we create them." It wasn't what she expected him to say. She braced for the PR pivot that never came. "I lost someone," he added, as if reading the question she hadn't asked. "A child, years ago." "I'm sorry," she said, "because there is a narrow seam in language where nothing else fits without tearing." "So am I," he said. "It makes me impatient with certain kinds of suffering. Babies should never be hungry. It's inefficient," he added, and the tiniest suggestion of a smile crossed his mouth, as if he couldn't help the gallows humor of a man who lived in ratios and returns. She set the glass down before she dropped it. "You sent a stranger money because you're impatient with suffering." "I sent you money because you asked for an amount that could disappear into a stranger's pocket without ruining them," he said. "And because you included the sentence, 'Don't tell mom,' that's the sentence of someone who still has pride." It was such a precise read of her that she wanted to look away. She didn't. "You said in your text," he continued, "that you would pay me back. I'm going to give you a way to do that that doesn't involve writing me a check you network connection lost. Attempting to reconnect?" The first thing Mara noticed wasn't the view. It was the silence. The kind that made you aware of your own breathing, of the soft scuff of your shoes on floors too clean to have a smell. The kind of silence that said, "Decisions are made here, and most of them cost something." A woman with auburn hair in a knot precise enough to be architectural appeared as the elevator doors slid open. "Miss Jensen?" Her voice was warm without being soft. "I'm Ava Lynn. This way, please." Ava didn't ask for a badge or an explanation. She didn't look at Mira's thrift store blouse or the diaper bag strap digging into her shoulder. She walked, and Mira followed through a corridor of frosted glass, where the shadows of other rooms moved like fish behind aquarium walls. At the end, the building opened into sky. He was standing with his back to them, hands in his pockets, the city thinking hard beneath the window. When he turned, the headlines caught up with the man. Storm gray eyes, a face arranged into stillness by habit, an absence of ring, a presence of attention. "Ms. Jensen," he said, "thank you for coming." She felt both seen and measured. "I don't know what I'm doing here." "That makes two of us," he said, just wry enough to undo a knot of her fear. He glanced at the baby carrier strap and nodded toward the chair opposite his desk. "Please." Ava set a glass of water by Mira's hand, then faded back to the door. "I'll be outside," she said, and was gone. Up close, he didn't look like a photograph. He looked tired in the expensive way, fatigue taken care of, but not solved. His sleeves were rolled, his cufflinks probably somewhere judging him. "You texted me for $50, he said, not unkindly. "I texted my brother by mistake," she corrected. He inclined his head, granting the edit. "And I sent 5,000. That part I still don't understand." Jackson considered her, then the skyline, then her again. "Most cons ask for more." She blinked. "So you assumed I was a liar and rewarded me?" "I assumed you were telling the truth," and he said, "and that you meant every word of it. Two different things." Mira gripped the water glass to keep her hands from fidgeting. "You know who I am," she said, an accusation made quiet by all. "You knew my address. You knew." "I asked my people to ensure you weren't being exploited," he said. "I don't make a habit of guessing with strangers' lives." He paused. "I apologize if it felt like a trespass." It had. It also felt like the first time in months someone had taken responsibility for how their choices landed on her. "You have a son," he said. "Noah," she said, and felt something in her voice soften at the name, like the way fabric changes where it's been worn most. "And you studied biochemistry," he added. Her mouth quirked. "You Googled me." "I read your academic abstracts." His tone contained no apology. "You were good at it." "I was almost good at it," she said. "Then life got expensive." He nodded once, as if he too knew the cost of things that didn't have price tags. "May I ask why you left?" he said. She could have lied. She didn't see the point. "I had a baby. My husband didn't have the courage to be a father. I needed a job with hours that didn't care if a molecule wanted to behave at 2 in the morning. I told myself I'd go back when we were steady." She let out a small breath. "We never got steady." He absorbed this without flinching, as though her honesty was something he was accustomed to handling carefully. "You survived," he said. "Surviving isn't a resume line," she said, then regretted how defensive it sounded. "It should be," he answered. "It's a skill most people who run companies don't have." They let the silence stand between them for a moment. Outside, a helicopter cut a line across the river and turned into nothing. The world went on. "You don't owe me anything," he said finally. "I didn't ask you here for gratitude." "Why did you ask me here?" she said. "If not to collect a favor, what's left?" Jackson's gaze shifted, one small degree, from strictly professional to almost human. "To tell you that I know what hunger does to a room, and that I'm sorry any part of my world contributed to it." She frowned. "Your world?" "Helix," he said simply. "The illusion we sell, efficiency that squeezes wages, innovation that underprices labor, philanthropy that photographs well. The city believes men like me are solving problems. Sometimes we create them." It wasn't what she expected him to say. She braced for the PR pivot that never came. "I lost someone," he added, as if reading the question she hadn't asked. "A child, years ago." "I'm sorry," she said, because there is a narrow seam in language where nothing else fits without tearing. "So am I," he said. "It makes me impatient with certain kinds of suffering. Babies should never be hungry. It's inefficient," he added, and the tiniest suggestion of a smile crossed his mouth, as if he couldn't help the gallows humor of a man who lived in ratios and returns. She set the glass down before she dropped it. "You sent a stranger money because you're impatient with suffering. I sent you money because you asked for an amount that could disappear into a stranger's pocket without ruining them, he said. And because you included the sentence, don't tell mom. That's the sentence of someone who still has pride. It was such a precise read of her that she wanted to look away. She didn't. You said in your text, he continued, that you would pay me back. I'm going to give you a way to do that. That doesn't involve writing me a check you network connection lost. Attempting to reconnect. The wrong number that changed everything. A billionaire's redemption and a mother's second chance. Chapter 1. The text that wasn't meant to be late at night. Struggling single mom Mira Jensen accidentally texts billionaire Jackson Albright while pleading for $50 to buy baby formula. Instead of ignoring her, he sends her $5,000 in baby supplies, sparking a strange, fateful connection. Chapter 2. A stranger's kindness, a hidden past. Mira learns Jackson's true identity, a widowed tech billionaire who hides from the world. Their tentative messages reveal shared pain, his loss, her struggle, and a spark of trust neither expected. Jackson offers her a meeting at his company, Helix Core, not as charity, but opportunity. Chapter 3. The job offer and the hidden rot. At Helix Core, Mira's analytical skills shine. She finds discrepancies in financial records and uncovers what looks like quiet embezzlement. Jackson secretly asks her to dig deeper, revealing that he's been suspecting internal fraud tied to someone powerful within his board. Chapter 4. The enemy within Mira discovers a sophisticated embezzlement scheme run by Vincent Harmon, Helix's CFO. The fraud involves ghost vendors and shell accounts. Jackson confides that 2 board members are compromised. The pair form a secret alliance to gather evidence, with growing mutual respect and trust between them. Chapter 5. The Trap and the Betrayal. Vincent confronts Jackson, revealing he's been collecting blackmail data to force Jackson out. Mira helps launch a counter-move with Keller, a former FBI accountant. They leak fake audit memos to bait Vincent into exposing himself. Tension builds as Mira and Noah go into hiding for safety. Chapter 6. Truth goes public. Their plan works. Vincent files false charges first, but Jackson and Mira go public with verified evidence. The scandal explodes. Keller's documentation exposes the fraud, and Vincent is removed. Mira becomes the whistleblower hero who saved Helix Core in Jackson's legacy. Chapter 7. From strangers to something more. Jackson promotes Mira to head of internal audit, giving her full authority. As they rebuild the company and their lives, an emotional bond blossoms. In the final scene, Jackson sends her a screenshot of her first text titled, "The Accident That Wasn't." He confesses he wants Mira and Noah in his life permanently. The story closes with Mira smiling at the doorbell, knowing he's waiting outside. Mira Jensen, a single mother and former biochem researcher who's lost everything but her integrity. Intelligent, driven, and quietly resilient. Jackson Albright, a reclusive billionaire and widowed tech CEO, haunted by loss, drawn to Mira's honesty and strength. Noah Jensen, Mira's infant son, innocent anchor and silent motivation throughout the story. Ava Lynn, Jackson's loyal chief of staff, calm and insightful, who becomes Mira's unexpected ally. Vincent Harmon, the polished, calculating CFO orchestrating corporate fraud behind the scenes. Keller, former FBI forensic accountant brought in to help expose Vincent, pragmatic and sharp. Inciting incident. Mira's mistaken text for baby formula. Rising action. Jackson's help turns into a life-changing job opportunity. Revelation. Mira uncovers corporate embezzlement. Complication. Vincent threatens to destroy both her and Jackson. Climax. Keller's operation exposes Vincent's scheme. The media storm erupts. Falling action. Jackson and Mira survive the scandal, rebuild Helix Core. Resolution. Love blossoms from trust. The wrong number becomes destiny. Twist. 1. Jackson isn't just a random stranger. He's a billionaire who lost his family and sees something of himself in Mira. Twist 2. The supposed act of charity becomes a professional partnership and emotional lifeline. Twist 3. The CFO's scheme ties directly into Jackson's inner circle, forcing Mira to risk everything. Twist 4. The wrong number message that began the story becomes a symbolic right choice that changes all their lives. She didn't cry when the landlord slid the red notice under her door, or when she watered down Noah's bottle for the third night in a row. She cried when a stranger she'd accidentally texted sent her $5,000 in 3 silent seconds. The apartment was dark because darkness was cheaper. The fridge hummed like a tired animal. The single window leaked cold into the kitchenette, and the baby blanket around Mira's shoulders smelled faintly of detergent she could no longer afford. Noah fussed on the mattress, mouth rooting, the kind of hunger cry that came from a place too deep to bargain with. She'd meant to text her brother, one more humiliating plea for $50, just enough to get through to Friday. Her thumb had moved quicker than her fear. 1 digit off. Send. The reply came while she was still rehearsing the apology she'd offer her brother when he inevitably groaned. "I think you meant to send that to someone else." The words pulsed on her cracked screen. Her stomach pitched. She tapped out a flurry of mortified backpedaling. "Sorry, wrong number. Please ignore." She locked the phone like she could lock the moment away and pulled the blanket tighter, rocking with the rhythm of the crying she refused to join. The phone buzzed again. "Is your baby going to be okay? Who asked that? Not 'are you scamming me?' or 'lose my number?' but a clean, careful question that stepped around shame like it knew the shape of it. Mira stared. Her pride flared and sputtered. "We'll manage," she typed. "Sorry again." She put the phone down, then picked it up, then put it down again like it was hot. Another buzz. "I can help." No strings. She scoffed aloud because she needed the sound to keep from falling. "Thanks, but I don't take money from strangers." Her thumb hovered. She wanted to add any more and didn't. "Smart policy," the stranger wrote. "I'm Jackson now. Not a stranger." The name read like a door without a handle. She didn't answer. The room smelled of dust and baby skin. Noah's cries collapsed into small, angry breaths. She swayed and hummed something her mother used to sing without remembering the words. It had been months since she'd believed in epilogues. Every day felt like another footnote to a long list of things she couldn't fix. Her phone buzzed again. Just take care of Noah. The name, Noah. She hadn't typed it. The realization flickered like a fuse almost catching. She told herself she must have, somewhere in that panicked blur to her brother, but the wrong number chain was its own little island. Emotion and logic wrestled while she scrolled. No, she hadn't. The unease was a thin wire in her chest. Still, there was the newborn fact of the day, $5,000. She opened the payment app because not looking wouldn't make it less real. The numbers sat there calmly, commas like handrails. She tapped the screen twice to make sure it wasn't an old balance resurrected by hope. "This is too much," she typed finally. "I only needed $50. It's already yours. No catch. One less thing to worry about." Explanations stacked in her head, scam, pity, trap, but nothing fit the shape of how ordinary his words felt. She put the phone on the counter, stared at the empty tin of formula, and chased breath back into her lungs. The night felt suddenly crowded, like every version of herself, student, lab tech, ex, mother, had filled the room to watch what she would do. She bought formula at 24-hour prices that might as well have been gold. Noah drank like the body remembers before the mind does, fierce and relieved, his lashes webbed with tears. Mira's hands shook as she held the bottle. When he finally sagged into the soft, heavy sleep of a full belly, she sat on the edge of the mattress and scrolled back to the message with Noah's name, held there and let the unease and gratitude braid themselves into something she didn't have a word for. She typed and deleted variations of thank you until what remained was spare and true. "You didn't have to do that." A long pause separated them like a hallway. "I know I didn't," came the reply. "I wanted to." She slept in fits, one ear tuned to Noah's breathing, one finger curved around the phone. When dawn nudged gray through the window, a knock startled the room into attention. Nobody knocked here. The landlord texted. The neighbors yelled through walls. Mira froze. Noah didn't stir. The knock came again. Polite, like it had been trained somewhere with carpet. She cracked the door chain. A delivery guy stood balancing a dolly stacked with boxes. "Delivery for Mira Jensen." She nodded because making a sound felt like committing to something too big to take back. She signed with a pen that said a bank's name she'd never qualified for. 4 boxes swallowed the living room. She opened them one by one on the floor like she was diffusing something dangerous. Formula, the good kind, the brand she'd always walked past. Diapers in sizes that anticipated a boy growing. Wipes, bottles, a soft blanket with little stitch foxes. Puree pouches lined up like a parade. At the bottom of the last box, a small envelope. No letterhead, no flourish. He should have what he needs. Noah deserves better than barely getting by. Jackson. Her name didn't appear anywhere, but the message met her in the exact coordinates of her life. She sat back on her heels and let the tears happen the way rain does when a cloud can't hold itself up anymore. There was too much tenderness in the thoughtfulness. Blackout curtains folded tight, a bottle brush, a onesie with tiny astronauts. It was like someone had looked directly at the negative space of her days and filled it. Suspicion lived beside gratitude because they were cousins, not enemies. People didn't do this without a camera, a catch, a cost, and yet here were boxes and a line drawn as clearly as if it had been written on the air. No strings. That word again. She tried to picture the man who could order a kindness this precise at this speed. The name was heavy in her mouth even when she didn't say it. Jackson. She texted because silence had begun to feel like a debt. The boxes arrived. "Thank you. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just take care of Noah." In that message was an authority she couldn't map. It wasn't the voice of someone playing a role. It was the voice of someone who had made choices like this before and survived whatever they cost. She tied up the empty box flaps and stacked them by the door for recycling. She rarely remembered to drag downstairs. Noah woke, hummed the sound he made when the world returned to him, and she kissed the place where his hair swirled at the crown. "We're okay," she whispered into that fragile whirl. "We're okay today." By mid-morning, sunlight haloed the cheap curtains into something prettier than they deserved to be. Mira brewed coffee by counting spoonfuls because the scoop had disappeared during one of the moves you make when life keeps shrinking around you. She sat on the linoleum with her back to the lower cabinet, the mug warming both hands, and watched Noah fall asleep again, full and soft, a fist hung open like he'd decided to trust gravity for once. The brain that had lain dormant under survival began to stir. She thought about the labs where she'd worked, about the cleanliness of a new test plate and the velocity of a centrifuge, and the gleam of possibility when numbers lined up under your hands. She thought about the string of jobs after, temporary contracts, side hustles that ate dignity for breakfast. She thought about the slow ways hope erodes. Then she looked at the boxes, at the quiet, at the man on the other end of a message thread, whose last words were not a demand, but a directive to care. She opened the chat again, typed, deleted, typed. "Why are you doing this?" Really? The bubbles appeared and disappeared like breathing. "Because once upon a time someone did it for me when I couldn't ask," he wrote, "and because no child should feel that kind of hunger." The answer arrived without ornament. It landed as heavily and simply as a hand on a shoulder. She stared at it until the words pressed through whatever hard things she'd built around herself to stay up. She typed, "I want to pay you back." It felt important to erect that tiny scaffolding around her dignity while it was still new enough to wobble. "For the formula? For the kindness?" he asked. "For not ignoring me," she wrote. "I'll figure it out." The little house plants on her windowsill had died and come back enough times to know that figuring it out was a season, not an event. "Tell me what kind of formula Noah needs," came the reply. "I'll send more." "Not money, supplies. Only if it's really no strings," she typed. "I don't do strings," he wrote. "Strings are for people playing games." She smiled despite herself at the odd elegance of that. She sent the brand and the ounces and the little details only parents memorized. The nipple flow that worked, the bottle type that didn't. It felt like writing a prescription for the life she wanted her son to have. The day slid forward. Afternoon stretched thin. She cleaned while the kettle hissed, threw away the expired ketchup packets that had become wall decor in the door of the fridge, folded the two good towels into tighter versions of themselves. The knock earlier had rearranged something in the room. Even the air looked different. She checked her account because disbelief is a habit that lingers. The money was still there, patient and unblinking. She put her phone on the sill to charge and watched sunlight creep across the floor, bright footstep by footstep. She thought that if you told the version of her from 2 nights ago that all of this lived inside a wrong number, that version would have laughed until she coughed. She picked up the phone to take a photo of Noah sleeping with the fox blanket tucked up to his ear, and the camera caught the boxes in the background, like proof she could scroll back to if the day decided to deny itself. Next to the photo app, the browser icon sat like a dare. She didn't press it. She wouldn't Google him, not yet. She wanted to live inside this one clean corridor where gratitude didn't have to fight with context. She texted instead, "He's sleeping now. Full. Thank you." A pause, then, "Good. That's how babies should sleep." She was still smiling when a small chill walked the line of her spine. It wasn't the draft under the door. It was the echo of earlier. Just take care of Noah. She had never typed his name. She scrolled the thread again, as if the letters might magically appear where they hadn't been. The unease grew teeth. Maybe she had mentioned Noah in that first message to her brother, the one that had never found him. She checked. The original plea lived in her send folder like a bruise. "Ben, I'm sorry to bother you again. I need $50 for formula." Noah's almost out. She'd written his name there. Of course she had, but she hadn't sent that to the stranger. Her heart climbed into her throat, not with fear exactly, but with the sense of a story widening around her. The world beyond the door felt closer, listening. The phone buzzed. "Get some rest," Jackson wrote. "You'll need your strength. Tomorrow's going to be better than today." It was a kindness and a prediction and a promise laid on the same line. She stared at the name, at the door without a handle, and realized that whether she opened it or not, it was already opening toward her. The boardroom was a glass cathedral, quiet, sterile, and high enough that the clouds looked close enough to touch. Mira sat just outside it, hands twisted in her lap, watching the red light above the doors that meant occupied. She could see Jackson through the tinted glass, a solitary figure at the head of the table, a man who looked nothing like the headlines. His expression was carved from composure, but even from here she saw the tension in his shoulders. The meeting was supposed to expose Vincent Harmon once and for all. Mira had spent the last week threading together every fragment of evidence she'd uncovered. The shell companies, the false invoices, the offshore accounts, the falsified audits. Jackson had promised it would all come to light today. She had believed him, because she had to. The elevator chimed behind her. When she turned, Ava Lynn stepped out, cool and immaculate as ever. Her heels clicked against the polished floor like punctuation marks. "You shouldn't be here," Ava said quietly. "I was asked to wait," Mira replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Ava's gaze lingered. "If this goes wrong, there won't be any waiting left to do." "What do you mean?" Ava sighed, brushing an invisible speck from her sleeve. "Jackson doesn't know when to quit. He's making enemies who have the means to bury him. And you," she tilted her head slightly, "are standing too close to the fire." Before Mara could respond, the boardroom doors slid open. Vincent Harmon emerged first, flanked by 2 assistants. His usual polished grin was gone. In its place was something between fury and disbelief. He shot Mara a look sharp enough to cut glass. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he hissed under his breath. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Mara held her ground. "Only what's right." He gave a hollow laugh. "You'll regret that. You think he'll protect you? He can't even protect himself." Then he was gone, storming toward the elevators, his entourage scurrying behind him. Jackson followed a moment later, slower, quieter. His tie was loosened, his composure slightly cracked. When his eyes found Mira's, she saw both relief and weariness there. "It's done," he said softly. "Done how?" He hesitated. "Vincent's out. But it's going to get ugly before it gets clean. He's not going quietly. Mara swallowed. You have proof, solid proof. He can't come back from this. Jackson's jaw tightened. He's not the only one implicated. Something cold crawled up her spine. Who else? 2 board members, he said. Paula Crane and Dennis Lang. They approved the transfers Vincent made. Whether knowingly or not, it's enough to collapse everything we built. Mira stared at him. So Helix is bleeding out, he finished. Ava stepped closer. You should both know the media already has wind of this. The leak started an hour ago. She handed Jackson her tablet, a news feed glowing across its surface. The headline blared, Helix Core CFO under investigation for fraud. CEO Albright implicated in cover-up. Mira's stomach lurched. Cover-up? They're twisting the audit, Ava said flatly. They're saying the numbers were massaged on your orders, Jackson. Vincent's lawyers are already feeding the story. Jackson didn't move. Of course they are. Ava's gaze flicked to Mira. You need to leave the building. Now. If reporters get your name, I'm not hiding, Mira said. Not when we're telling the truth. Jackson looked at her, a quiet intensity in his eyes. Sometimes the truth takes time to matter. Before anyone could speak again, the sharp trill of Jackson's phone cut through the air. He stepped aside to answer, his voice dropping low. Mira caught fragments. Federal inquiry, shareholders, seizure notice. When he returned, his expression had hardened into something almost unreadable. They've frozen our account, he said. We're under federal review effective immediately. Ava exhaled. That was fast. It was Vincent, Jackson said. He prepared for this. He had the paperwork ready the moment I walked into that room. Mira's mind spun. So what now? Now, he said quietly, we finish it on our terms. Hours later, the building was nearly empty. Reporters camped outside the revolving doors. Security escorted remaining staff out through the side exits, their faces tight with confusion and fear. Jackson's office, normally pristine, was a battlefield of documents, open laptops, and empty coffee cups. Mira sat across from him, Noah's photo resting beside her notepad. She watched as Jackson typed line after line of instructions, his phone buzzing every few seconds. We can't let Vincent rewrite the story, he said. If we leak the full audit, with your original data trail, they'll have to follow the truth. Won't that make you look guilty before it clears you? She asked. He gave a tired half smile. It'll make me look human. That's worse in my world, but better for yours. Mira reached for one of the files. This one, Helix Biomed Research. It's tied to the same shell company I traced earlier. Jackson's hands paused on the keyboard. How many transfers? 8, she said, flipping through the printouts, totaling 15 million, all approved within 48 hours of Vincent's wife setting up a new foundation in Belize. He let out a slow, deliberate breath. There's our smoking gun. They worked in silence after that. Numbers, emails, signatures. Mara's mind blurred with dates and decimals, but she kept going because she owed him and because truth was a kind of revenge neither of them had dared to dream of. Sometime past midnight, Ava returned with 2 thermoses of coffee and a grim look. I just got off the phone with legal, she said. Vincent's attorneys filed an injunction. They're claiming you tampered with evidence, Mira. What? Mira's voice cracked. They're using your employee ID to backdate a transaction, Ava continued. They're saying you planted the files you found to frame him. That's insane, Jackson stood, already pacing. He's trying to discredit her. It's a distraction. It's working, Ava said. A warrant's being processed. They'll come for her by morning. Mira felt the room tilt. Then I should go. No, Jackson said sharply. If you disappear, it looks like guilt. Stay here. Ava's brow arched. And when security brings the marshals to the 47th floor? Jackson stopped pacing. His gaze shifted between them, calculation flickering behind his exhaustion. We move everything off-site. Keller has the secure drive system ready. We upload everything. Vincent's transfers, Paula's signatures, the offshore trail. Once it's out, they can't erase it. Ava nodded slowly. And after that? Jackson looked at Mira. After that, we tell the truth, no matter what it costs. By dawn, the upload was complete. Keller's servers blinked alive somewhere across the city. Every document, every ledger, every email was mirrored to a dozen hidden drives. Mira stood by the window as the first light bled through the skyline. Down below, the reporters' vans looked like toy cars in a spilled sandbox. She felt hollow and awake all at once. Jackson joined her, hands in his pockets. "You did good," he said softly. "I just followed the trail." He smiled faintly. "You followed your conscience. That's rarer." She turned to look at him. For a moment, the exhaustion between them was replaced by something simpler: quiet recognition, gratitude, the fragile bond of two people who had walked through fire and still managed to stand. "What happens now?" she asked. He looked out over the city, eyes reflecting the bruised pink of morning. "Now we wait for the world to notice who the real villains are." Mira nodded slowly, unsure whether he meant Vincent, the board, or himself. Behind them, Ava's voice cut through the silence. "We have company." Mira turned. Two men in dark suits stood at the threshold, badges glinting. Federal agents. "Mara Jensen," one said. Jackson stepped forward before she could answer. "She's with me." The agent held up a folder. "We have a warrant for her questioning and for the seizure of Helix Core's main servers." Mara's throat went dry. "But Jackson raised a hand. "Don't say anything." He glanced at Ava, then back at the agents. "You can take me instead. I authorized her investigation. She was following my orders." The lead agent's expression didn't change. "We'll need you both." Jackson exhaled slowly. "Then let's go." Mira looked up at him, panic and defiance warring in her chest. "You don't have to." "I told you," he said quietly, meeting her eyes. "We finish this together." And as the agents led them out, Mira realized that the truth, beautiful, terrifying truth, had finally found its price. They separated them at the federal building, 2 different floors, 2 different rooms, 2 different cups of paper-thin coffee that tasted like cardboard and nerves. Mira sat beneath a buzzing light with a recording device the size of a paperback placed carefully between her and 2 agents who introduced themselves by last name only. Across her palms, the faint ridges of dried printer ink from the night's work had become a map of everything she'd touched and couldn't let go. "Ms. Jensen," the older agent began, tone professional but not unkind. "In your own words, tell us why you accessed Helix Core's restricted financial systems." Mara folded her hands to anchor them. "Because the numbers didn't make sense," she said, "and because babies starve when grown-ups lie." A silence, bare as a wire, stretched across the table. Then the younger agent nodded once. "Start at the beginning." So she did. She told them about a midnight text and a wrong number and a deposit that made her feel like she was holding stolen air. About the job that wasn't charity in the audit ledger that hummed with a pattern no one was supposed to see. She spoke of shell vendors named like myths and signatures that slid through approval thresholds like greased keys. She named Vincent Harmon and the offshore foundation set up 2 days before a cluster of transfers. She named Paula Crane and Dennis Lang and the board votes that turned caution into conspiracy. When they asked about Jackson Albright, she didn't falter. "He asked me to find the truth, and when I did, he stood in front of it." The older agent turned off the recorder. "For what it's worth," he said, voice low enough to feel human, "we've received a great deal of corroborating evidence from a third party." "Keller?" Mira exhaled, something like gratitude loosening the knot where breath was supposed to live. "Yes," she said. "Keller." They released her at noon. In the hallway, she found Jackson with his tie tucked into his pocket like surrender. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with choosing the hardest answer too many times. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "You?" He gave the ghost of a smile. "I will be." Ava waited by the elevators, face composed, eyes bright with the kind of satisfaction that only justice could purchase. "Keller's packet hit the Attorney General an hour before dawn," she said as the doors slid shut. "By the time the board's legal team woke up, the evidence was already sitting in 4 inboxes they can't erase. The AG's office is drafting charges." "Against Vincent?" Mira asked. Ava's mouth tipped. "Against Vincent," she confirmed. "And Paula and Dennis." She looked from one to the other. "And Helix will not be allowed to bury this. Not this time." Outside, the cameras had multiplied. Reporters shouted questions like thrown coins. Jackson lifted a hand in a quiet gesture that said, "Not today," and guided Mara and Ava into an unmarked sedan that Keller swore had never existed on paper. Newscasters spoke over one another as they pulled into traffic. Albright questioned and released. Bored faces, state probe. By evening, the headlines had changed again. Paula Crane resigned under immense personal strain. Dennis Lang stepped down citing health reasons. Vincent Harmon, arrested at a private clinic, was photographed leaving in handcuffs that clashed violently with his watch. Helix Corp's stock plunged and then, strangely, stabilized as the AG's office announced a controlled oversight period. The words felt like scaffolding being bolted to a building that had swayed for too long. 2 days later, Jackson called a press conference. Not the theatrical kind with lights and velvet ropes, but a quiet podium in the atrium where employees stood shoulder to shoulder in rumpled shirts and cardigans with coffee stains. Mara watched from a side balcony between Ava and the security guard, who had once double-checked her name like it belonged to someone else. Jackson spoke without notes. He didn't try to be charming. He didn't try to be loved. He said the board had failed, and that he, as their compass, had failed sooner. He said the research mattered more than the logo, and that sunlight would be Helix's new language. Then he did the thing that held the room in a stunned, aching stillness. He stepped aside. "Effective immediately," he said, voice steady. "I'm resigning as CEO. My remaining personal equity will transfer to an independent research trust focused on maternal and neonatal health. Helix's internal controls and ledgers will be open-sourced within 90 days. Real transparency isn't a press release. It's a daily practice." A murmur rolled through the atrium. Shock, sorrow, relief, all braided together. Mara felt the sound move through her ribs like a weather front. Afterward, in the quiet of his emptied office, he pressed a folder into her hands. "You'll be named Director of Audit Ethics when the Oversight Committee finalizes interim leadership," he said, as if this were just another memo, not a line across her life. "Build the system you needed when you were outside the glass." "I'm not qualified," she said automatically. He tilted his head. "You're the only one who is." Ava's smile was small and fierce. "We've already told the committee you'll design the portal and the review cadence. You'll hire independently. No more foxes guarding hen houses." Keller leaned in the doorway with a grin that softened the scar on her temple. "Welcome to the side of power that terrifies liars." Mira thought of her notebook at home, the first page that read, "Return money," the ledger of groceries and diapers and hours bought back by a stranger's text. "Okay," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "Let's build it." They did. The first version of the Helix ledger went live in 63 days. It was inelegant and stubborn and honest. Anyone could see how a dollar moved, where it paused, who touched it, why. An academic journal called it reckless. A patient advocacy group called it the blueprint. Small labs copied its bones and added their own calcium. A reporter wrote that the portal had the strange beauty of a confession that doesn't ask for absolution. Mira's days became a rhythm of code reviews and policy drafts and baby nap schedules. She worked from a corner office that used to belong to someone whose name was now a line in a court filing. On the sill, a new plant leaned toward the light with shameless ambition. Sometimes at 2 a.m., when the portal logs flared with traffic and the city beyond looked like a motherboard from the sky, she remembered the way numbers had once felt like traps and realized she had turned them into doors. Vincent pled. He swapped couture for state-issue gray and the performative humility of a man who never imagined his life would be measured in years served. Paula negotiated, then found that the law had less to bargain with than conscience. Dennis retired to a quiet corner of the world where headlines were rumors and golf was penance. Ava became COO and made the job look like choreography. Keller took a consulting role with the trust, popping into meetings like a storm front, leaving candor and better plans in her wake. She sent Mara a text once at midnight. "I like the way your brain refuses to be lied to." It was the most generous sentence Mara had ever received from her. As for Jackson, he did what he said he would. He disappeared, but not into nothing. A letter arrived on thick paper with no return address and a stamp from a country that loved mountains. Mira, it read, if Helix learns to be small enough to be human, that will be your doing. I'm working with a group in Geneva designing ethical frameworks for trials no one wanted to police. It feels like penance with a purpose. If the trust ever needs a meddlesome volunteer who knows how to read a spreadsheet and shut up when scientists talk, I'm reachable through Keller. Tell Noah that a stranger he doesn't remember wishes him a world where mothers don't have to write their hunger down to be believed. J. She read it twice at her kitchen table while Noah constructed a city of cereal O's on his high chair tray. Then she tucked the letter into the drawer with his hospital bracelet and the first receipt from the grocery delivery that had made her feel both terrified and seen. Months later, she stood again in the park by the river, the one where perspective came cheaply and pigeons cost a handful of stale bread. Noah toddled in uneven joy toward the water and back again. The skyline glowed with the kind of evening that made hope feel less like delusion and more like a muscle you could train. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Helix Trust funds community clinics in 3 cities. Maternal care pilot expands. Another. Open ledger standard adopted by 2 major research hospitals. She sent both to Ava with a string of exclamation points and to Keller with try pretending you're not proud of us. Keller replied with a single thumbs up, which, translated from Keller, meant screaming internally with approval. Mira sat on a bench and opened a draft of the next policy update. Plain language, no legal embroidery, just the truth in bullets. She wrote the first line and smiled at what it sounded like out loud. We owe you our honesty before we ask for your trust. Noah crawled into her lap with a contented sigh that said the universe, for this moment, had done its math correctly. She pressed a kiss into his hair and watched a boat cut the river into temporary halves that stitched themselves back together as soon as it passed. Later on the walk home, she passed the corner store where she had once stood under a hungry light and texted the wrong number. She could still feel the gravity of that moment, how it had bent the path ahead. She took out her phone and scrolled all the way back to the top of a thread she had archived in a folder labeled Begin. Ben, I'm sorry to ask again, but I need $50 for formula. Please don't tell Mom. Below it, the reply that had changed the way her life pronounced itself. Buy what you need. Don't pay me back. She didn't screenshot it. Jackson had already done that once, and his copy felt like a relic belonging to both of them. She just let it be what it was, the hinge on which her world had swung open. At home, when Noah slept and the plant on the sill leaned toward tomorrow, Mira wrote a note on a fresh page of a new notebook, one without the austerity of debt columns or panic math. Today, built something true. Tomorrow, do it again. She closed the cover and turned off the light. The city thrummed. Somewhere across an ocean, a man with storm-gray eyes tried to make institutions kinder. Here, a woman who had once counted the pennies in her coat pocket counted red flags before they became alarms. Between them stretched a line not of romance nor obligation, but of rescue shared and repaid in the currency of better choices. Sometimes the right message is the one you never meant to send. Sometimes the person you text by mistake is simply the person who answers. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that's enough to save you both.